Hi everyone, it's Will with the new Grand Duke Dmitri diary video of the 1921 series. We're up to the 19th of March, and I particularly like this diary entry. So the recap, what happened on the 18th of March, Dmitri had two more visitors. He'd had two who were bringing a sort of, I guess, investment project for a railroad the day before. And then on the 18th, he had two who were seeking to start a military political party in Yugoslavia. So one of them, his name was Bubnov, and I was kind of making fun of him a little bit. But wasn't that a nice, excuse me, a nice drawing that I found to use for the thumbnail? So Dmitri really liked him, right? And what I found out about Bubnov that I forgot to mention is that he wrote memoirs about his time at headquarters, at both the Russian headquarters, Baranovichi and then Mogilov. So, and you can access them easily online. So I'm going to do that. And I hope, I mean, the book will be worth reading for itself, but I hope he does mention Dmitri in it. Okay, so then Dmitri went to Versailles with Coco. And then he won a little money playing baccarat at the Travelers Club, which is a very dangerous activity for him because he tended to get sucked into it. Okay, our cast today, excuse me, we have the same Kutuzov who'd come on the 17th to bring somebody to talk about the railroad project. He doesn't appear today, but one of his friends comes that Dmitri has agreed to meet. Okay, so let's dive into it. 19th March 1921, a Saturday, Rouen, Grand Hotel d'Angleterre. Lyovshin came to see me in Paris in the morning. It might be Lyovshin, actually. That's me, not Dmitri. Lyovshin or Lyovshin came to see me in Paris in the morning. I received him at the advice of Seryoja Kutuzov, and I had also heard from lots of people that he was forming some kind of secret organization in which you need to take vows and swear some kind of oath, and it's all somehow very dark and mysterious. Lyovshin sat down with me for about 2 hours and talked a great deal, but he didn't say a single word on that whole topic. I didn't understand a single thing he said, because all he did was repeat old truths about the revolution and his own desire to save Russia. I lunched at Coco's place at the Ritz. She decided she wanted to try her new car out, and so we decided to go to Rouen in it. That's about 150 kilometers. We wanted to leave at 3 o'clock, but the car wasn't ready, so we ended up going around 5 o'clock. It was truly superb. As soon as we got out of the city limits, we stopped, and I got behind the wheel with Coco sitting next to me. We arrived around 9 o'clock. It was already dark. The hotel was totally second-rate, but the rooms were quite decent. Ours were adjacent. We went to bed early because we intended to leave early the next day. All right, fair enough. So let's talk briefly about Major General Dmitri Fyodorovich Lyovshin, or Lyovshin. He was in his 40s, and he ticked all the right boxes on his resume for someone who was going to go far in Imperial Russia at court. He'd been in the Corps de Page. He'd been, after he graduated, he went into the Cavalier Guards, and then he became himself commander of the Guards Hussars during the war. He was a member of Nicholas II's suite. After the revolution, he fought in the volunteer army. That was Denikin's group, which may explain why now he's in Paris. But despite all of this, Dmitri's pretty exasperated. He's pretty exasperated, I think we can tell, with all these rather silly plans to save Russia. Here's another person who wants to save Russia. Well, he himself was thinking of saving Russia not too long ago, but he's done with that. You notice now in these diary entries that he's not saying one single word anymore about Kirill, about whether he needs to not go off with Coco because it will ruin his public image as someone who's a potential future Tsar of Russia. that's done. He's had it. Okay, so next comes the road trip in the Rolls. Boy, sounds nice, doesn't it? A Rolls convertible. So my question with that is, why did Dmitri wait until they were out of Paris to drive? And it's not an important question, obviously, but I think it's an intriguing one. It could be because Coco wanted to drive her own new car for a little while, or it could be that they had a driver with them, and Dmitri thought it better not to drive in the city limits because he probably didn't have a driver's license. And I know they had driver's licenses at that period, and I know you could get tickets, and you wouldn't think it would have been that big of a deal, but, you know, it would have ended up in the scandal sheets in the newspapers. You know, Grand Duke Dmitri gets ticket driving without a license, accompanied by Coco Chanel. It would have been quite funny, but something he would have wanted to avoid. And then the other question, why did he take over after they got outside of town, especially if they had a driver? Well, you know, to a certain extent, I know driving was a gendered activity, you know, until relatively late. Neither of my grandmothers died, though honestly, I think over the years my grandfathers would have preferred if they'd showed an inclination to drive so that they didn't have to be driven everywhere. And I was trying to think, when I was a kid, my mother is deceased, my father is still among the living, and I was trying to remember a single instance when we went out as a family, mom, dad, and kids, that dad wasn't behind the wheel. And I don't know if that was my mother's preference. It seemed to me like it was just automatic. None of us ever thought twice about it. You know, when we went out as a family, dad drove. And Dmitri was sensitive about these things. I remember in one of the diary entries from Persia when he'd had a boil on his thigh and he couldn't sit astride a horse and he was going to go out. Usually, Marlene would go in the carriage and he would accompany her on horseback. But this time he had to sit in the carriage and he was so embarrassed. He just didn't want anybody to see him at all. So, you know, for him, he was a male chauvinist. He would have wanted to be behind the wheel. And that, you know, some of you recall from not that long ago when he was on his Copenhagen trip, when they go out to one of the castles belonging to the Danish royal family. They make an excursion, a big group of people, and Dmitri is in a car that is being driven by a woman. And on the way home, he ends up driving that car. He doesn't say anything about, you know, either him driving or her driving home, but yeah, you know, it's kind of interesting. So when I looked up how long it takes now to drive from Paris to Rouen, something I've never done, apparently it's about 2 hours. Whereas it took them 4 hours, apparently, but they may have stopped along the way, we don't know. So the Hotel d'Angleterre, there is one in Rouen, but it's just called the Hotel d'Angleterre. It's not called the Grand Hotel d'Angleterre, so I don't know if it's the same establishment. It's not a fancy place. It's a 3-star, very inexpensive. You can get a suite for, you know, starting at like 93 euros. So, but it looks nice. It's right, you know, you have a great view, and yeah, so maybe it was, maybe it wasn't. But at any rate, it's clear that this was not a night of passionate abandon for them. They went to bed early, he tells us, so they could get up early the next morning. And, you know, there are sometimes in the diaries when Dmitri does have a night of passionate abandon, and he talks about, you know, not getting into his own bed till 6 a.m. and being exhausted the next day, and you know, whatever they did that night, it wasn't a night like that. Okay, so what do we have next time? We have the return trip, of course. They decide to take a different route to see different scenery, and it will be, you know, an interesting drive. And then Dmitri will spend a nice evening with old Russian friends. He and Coco, as I mentioned earlier, will be departing on the 22nd, and this will be the 20th, the next diary entry. But the funny thing about the next diary entry is that he's going to go to the Ritz, and people are going to think he's drunk. And he's not drunk. So come back to find out why it was when he walked into the Ritz that people thought he was drunk. All right, I'll see you next time. Bye.